Hey, Jennifer Lee, how the heck are you?
I'm great. Welcome back to another episode of Measure Twice, Cut Once.
I am still having trouble coming to grips with the fact we're already in season 6. We've had so many great conversation, including last week we had Jim Smith on, and we're going to keep that conversation going. We have an amazing two guests joining us today. Of course, my dear friend Todd Best, and we have Ian here as well, Ian McLean from Ian McLean Architecture, and we're going to have a really cool conversation about how to renovate an award-winning dream home.
Yeah, Ian's going to be your best friend after this, too.
I can already tell that. Can already tell that.
Well, I'm really excited to have you guys on. Todd, I've known you for a long time as well. Also a child of a family builder. Of course, you've got your sons going to be taking over your business one day as well. And so I always love chatting with you. But for our listeners that maybe don't know you as much yet, can you give us a little brief Todd history and how you got your best builders? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've never done anything but construction. So my father was an architect and was an architect for the Department of Public Works. So a lot of his jobs back then when I was a kid were restoring old heritage buildings that are here in Vancouver. That was sort of his forte, if you will. He retired early and started the first generation of Best Builders. And I remember the first project that we had as his company, which was then Gary Best Design and Construction. We built Expo, 3 pavilions at Expo. And that's where I think I really got a love and knew that this is what I wanted to do. I really enjoyed the building aspect and the camaraderie with the guys and stuff. So, that sort of pushed me along that line of, okay, I want to be on hand. I'm a tactile learner. I did struggle in school a bit, but as soon as I found that, you can build stuff with your hands, schooling became really easy because I could put what I learned in class to use and then see the finished product. And I think that's also led me to, wanting to make sure I can apprentice all these young guys. And we have a new program, of course, but we can go into that later. But I always had a love for the impossible. I wanted people to tell me, you can't build that or that can't be built. And I think that's what I've kind of set the basis of Best Builders on, is we don't want to take on, 15 projects. I could be building as many homes at a time as I want, I suppose. But I'm really looking for those clients that want something special, maybe an expression of who they are or an expression of how they like to live. They want to be a little bit extra creative. They don't want just that another house on a block. And this is what, Ian brings to the table for me as well, is, again, you get that teamwork and that like-minded thinking. And if you can get a client in that too, then it makes everything really fun. It makes for an exciting project. And my boys have been able to watch, I guess, myself develop. And I'm thinking, after all these years, I'm finally at the point now in my life where the business is very comfortable. We have steady clients coming in. We've won a lot of awards. And I'm starting to wind down. So I've put in all this hard work. So I'm very fortunate to have two sons that are very interested in the business, and they want to see it better. Like, they still see the flaws, if you will, in their dad. Like, Dad, if you'd done that a little bit better, this would be that much. So they want to put their own touch on it as well, which, I find very exciting. They want to get involved with the conversations with the clients. They want to get involved with the marketing. So to see, I think as a dad, you want to see your sons be a better version of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes with my company too. I wanted to do the things my dad couldn't accomplish, which I've managed to do a lot of the things because he struggled. But having said that, now I've taken the company to a very comfortable place in the market. I've got lots of great friends with Havan, like tons of great friends with Havan, lots of great associates. A lot of my friends now are handing their companies on to their sons. So my sons are making friends with their sons. So this is a really exciting time for Best Builders.
That's great. And again, like I said, similar situation, except I'm not taking over the family business because they don't trust me with a hammer, but my brother one day will.
Yeah.
And Expo 86, so funny you mentioned that. A lot of great builders came from that. My dad also worked on a few pavilions there. So it just seems to be like it was the start to a great generation of home builders. And Ian, how did you get into architecture before you met this lovely gentleman?
Well, I grew up on Vancouver Island, and I would work with a framing company, a contractor building houses on Vancouver Island. My grandfather also was a builder. Immigrated from Denmark, and so I always was inclined to. I always knew I wanted to be an architect, but I thought the best practical. I wanted to get practical experience with house building, and so from there I went to paid my way through University of Victoria, and then did my Master's of Architecture at UBC. Um, and it was when I was interning with Don Stewart Architect that I met Todd on a project we were doing in West Vancouver.
My first Georgie.
Your first Georgie.
My first Georgie.
And so we've known each other since 2006, and been working together on a number of projects since then. So.
But you have a very unique story because you wear multiple hats, right? There's all sorts of different kinds of architects, just like there's all sorts of different kinds of buildings.
Yeah.
And what I find very fascinating about you, well, forget about what I think. Tell everybody what you do primarily, because this part with homes is a passion project, right? You wear multiple hats.
Yeah, my primary job is I'm a director at a large local architecture firm, HCMA. We do community centers, pools, schools, community-based buildings. But I've never been able to let go of my passion, which is building houses, designing and building houses with good builders. I take on a select number of clients, and it's something that I'll never let go of because I love doing it and I love working with people. We have a very collaborative approach. So, like Todd says, I work very close to the builder, and also we need a good client that's part of the team. So if we have if the three of us have a good synergy and work together, then there's great results. So,
but it's got to be challenging, right? Because when you're doing commercial design, that's, for lack of a better term, an industrial finish, right? So doing what you're going to do on a commercial basis is, first of all, a larger scale,
yeah.
But also it's very different in feel than a residential area. How do you go between those two worlds?
It's a good question. They are quite different. But I find that the residential world is much more, it's a little bit less rigid, and it's a little more, I can have a little bit more sort of creative touch and sort of collaboration with trades, with good builders. And with the institutional work, there's a certain rigidity and structure to it. And so I find it's good to have both, but
You're not playing with the owners either, which we like, right? You like to
exactly,
get into the owner's head. When you're building a school, it's a school.
You can't be that
It's
creative.
much more
Yeah.
I feel
personal.
like a pool would be cool though.
It is. I mean, the result of it is quite spectacular and beautiful, but you have to remember it's a much larger team, and you're one part of a much larger process. Whereas with a custom home, you can really develop close relations with the owner and with the trades and the builder that you're working with, and have a much more sort of personal creative contribution, I feel. So I do love both, but that's, yeah.
Well, and at the end, when you have that homeowner walk into their home for the first time and see it for the first time versus like a school trustee, right? Like it's going to be very, very different.
Yeah.
One question I ask a lot of people in the design end of things is this: when you're dealing with a commercial and industrial design, it's like you said, very rigid. There's certain things you have to use for fire and this and that. You're a lot more creative. You have the other side of your brain going when you're doing home stuff.
Yeah.
Where do you draw your inspiration from, right? Because you're going from one world where you have a lot that you can't be creative, and then you're going to another world where it's literally a blank slate. How do you figure out all of these details for people?
That's a good question. I mean, it's part of the creative process. I think all architects, or at least, I mean, it's drawn on, it's like a personal reservoir of creative ideas, and it's about getting to know the client and understanding what's important to them. So I'm not a sort of a top-down architect. I like to kind of get to know the client and get to know what's important to them, and then work collaboratively. Obviously, I have my own things that I feel are passionate and important to me. And I've always loved housing, so I love just imagining a domestic space and how people are going to occupy it and live in it and enjoy it with their families. And that's it's something that I draw upon.
If I can add in something for you, and I'll tell you one of the things that makes them so valuable for us is with all buildings in Vancouver, you have these building envelopes, which people don't realize. You got these invisible lines around your existing home or the home you're going to build, and you have to build within those lines. What we found is that Ian's very good at creating something really unique and special with maybe an area that otherwise would have, say, just been trusses and dead roof space. Ian's been able to take a very unique maybe shape for a small lot and then being able to maximize what we can get out of the house. And Ian's quick, even when, it's one of us will say, hey, what about this really neat space? And Ian will go, oh, wouldn't that make a unique place for the kid to have a little fort in the house? Or so, I mean, that is also constantly evolving. It's not like Ian's a, draw and drop guy, which, a lot of people we are. Here's the drawings, build the house, goodbye. Ian wants to come by, he wants to visit with the carpenters, that's what makes it exciting for the client. They see us together and you're getting energy and I always get goosebumps on my arms because then the creative juices get flowing and then the client picks up on it and then they get, well, what if this was kind of crazy, but what if? And Ian's like, yeah, I could draw that. And then that's where Ian's creativeness really starts to pay dividends.
But that's why it's so important. Like we always repeat this on this podcast is having the right team. And you guys, you can already tell that you love working together because I think sometimes, and this is not you obviously, Ian, but sometimes the architects and builders don't necessarily work together. Like you said, Todd, they'll drop off the plans and that's it. But a lot of things too, just because it can be in drawings doesn't necessarily mean when you get it to the stage, it can be functional. So sometimes you guys really have to put your problem solving hats on and being like, we want to keep that part of the architect's design, but how does this work structurally?
Yeah, and it keeps the conflict. I mean, you get a lot of jobs that we've gone to, builders and architect are in constant conflict because the architect has a vision and the builder's saying, there's no way I can physically build that. And I think that's where you get a lot of commotion. And when the owners pick up on that energy, then they start getting worried because all they see is, I've got two guys at $200 an hour each arguing over how they're going to frame that piece of roof. And that makes for a kind of a dysfunctional job because then the carpenters are listening to it and there's no chemistry anymore on the project. I think what we want to do is when we set up a team for a project is, Ian just came in to help me with a project that we're doing because the architect was struggling actually. And we introduced Ian, but Ian was able to take the details. He's worked so well with all the carpenters on my team. He worked through all the details really, really quick, had it done, solved, found some cost savings, solved the problems, and moved on. And we did it as a team.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that there's a lot of aspects of our industry that are stressful, and as Todd says, we try to we always find ways to work through, and we're problem solvers, and we have a.
But we have each other's back.
We have each other's back.
You also have good timing, right? We keep talking about this. It's when you engage your entire team. You can't engage part of your team part of the time and the rest of your team the rest of your time.
No.
So what you guys have just done is underscored A, the importance for me as a homeowner to make sure that I'm talking to everyone on my team, and B, making sure they can work well together at the earliest possible opportunity as opposed to waiting till it's too late. You guys have just proved everything we've talked about correct yet again. So thank you.
And you can answer Todd as part of your answer if you like to, or you can use another builder. But Ian, I just want to know, have you ever done a design where you feel the builder actually brought an extra special something to your design to life?
I would say that probably happens all the time. I mean, almost all the time. And I mean, it's a collaborative process. Like I have probably the initial vision, and then I think it goes back to my working directly with builders, and also as my grandfather was a builder, and just having that respect for what is brought to the table from the practical side, from the builder, from the key trades. Like it's not me dictating the design. It's us working collaboratively together to deliver a great home for clients. So
because at the end of the day, we got to remember too, we're not going to live there. It's got to be functional for the people in there. So it can't be like, it can be our showpiece kind of, but we're not going to be living there and doing the dishes with them.
It's not all about me, right?
Yeah.
As the I have a vision, but it's based on what's practical, what the client's budget is, and also, what's buildable.
And then you get back to the owner being, if the owner is confident that he has a team also that has his back and is willing and wanting to express their points. The Triadic project that we're going to talk a little bit about. I mean, this was a job that kind of went all over the place, and there was lots of opportunities there. And some of the opportunities were brought up by the carpenters, vaulting the upstairs ceiling to get extra height, turned into a beautiful detail that we just figured it out as a team, told the owners what the costs were. They went for it because it improved their view. So you created these really cool little features out of a home that really didn't have much of a budget. But because we hit the points at the right time, they just became part of the actuality. So it wasn't like going backwards to go forwards. And there wasn't like, well, what do you think? Well, that wasn't my idea, so we're not going to do it. So there's no egos with this team, which I love, because sometimes you unfortunately get that an ego with the builder or the architect, or they're always arguing over, well, whose idea is it? Who's designed it anyways?
Happens a lot.
This is
It's
just
an ego business at the end of the day. Yeah.
but this is just us having a good time. I mean, it really is. And I think that's what I tell clients. As soon as it stops being a good time, I don't want to work for you.
No.
Yeah.
Well, you've just underscored why it matters, right? Because I go to a lot of different projects with a lot of different people. And when I've been on your sites, the clients have been very happy at the end because this can be a stressful experience. It can be a difficult
100%.
experience.
Mhm.
And because of people like yourselves who've made the process very integrated and very accessible to the homeowner, there's no surprises. So a lot of that stress and trepidation that can come
Mhm.
with not working with the right team or not having team timing properly isn't there. And that creates better results, not only in the finished product, but for us who are homeowners, the whole process. And that's really, really important. And that's something not enough people think about. They're looking at bottom lines and that's it.
And there needs to be a mechanism for stress. So, I mean, even when clients are like, they come home and they go, oh no, like this is not working. Well, with us, it's always been a quick phone call to myself. And then I get Ian on the line, and all of a sudden they've got the whole team. So we find our clients aren't stressed because we've said, if you're worried, phone and we'll make something work for you. And we've always responded very quickly. So we've actually alleviated that homeowner calling over and over and over again. And every time they call, a little bit madder, they're climbing up the chart before they finally explode over something that could have been fixed very easily by a very skilled team. So that's what we've told. I mean, the client that you're helping us with the low voltage.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a very, very difficult reno that Ian and I did. And there were lots of times, believe me, I get the call at midnight. I can't sleep because I can't think of how this is going to work. Okay, I'll call Ian in the morning. We'll call you and we'll come by the house.
Yeah.
And, in the morning we go by, we'd fix it and she'd be happy. But that's, again, the importance of a good team. Covering for it, helping each other is not me saying, well, Ian, that's a silly detail that Ian drew. There's no way I can build that. I'd never do that. I'd phone Ian and say, hey, what was your vision for this? Because maybe I can make that work. Client doesn't even need to know about it. So you're just cutting that stress out of the loop. So I think that's important for more people to realize that you can fix that with a friendly phone call as opposed to, well, that's not me. That's that guy. So deal with that guy and then call me back.
Yeah, like you said, it's so important to have great communication.
Yeah.
Great communication with the people on your team, great communication with the clients, because at the end of the day, too, it's an emotional experience for the clients
Yes.
because there's money tied to it. And
Yeah.
that can be volatile if you don't handle it the proper way.
It's their life
Absolutely.
savings a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of great communication, we should take just a couple moments and take a break to thank our amazing sponsors.
Love the segue. Measure Twice, Cut Once is grateful to our podcast partners, Fortis BC, Vico Stone Canada Inc., and Trail Appliances. Support from our partners helps us share expert knowledge and resources with families looking to build, design, and renovate the home right for you. Vico Stone is renowned for providing exquisite quartz slabs, ideal for both kitchen countertops and vanities. Their extensive range caters to diverse preferences, offering everything from the versatile builder collection to the opulent and luxurious designs. Established as a reliable and preferred choice in the industry, they have earned the trust and admiration of local stone fabricators and interior designers. Trail Appliances makes everyday life better with the best selection in Western Canada, hassle-free delivery, and a price match guarantee. So you'll always get the best deal. Trail Appliances. Make sure you'll love buying an appliance as much as you love using it. And we all need reliable and efficient equipment for our better comfort, health, and safety of our homes. Whether you want to adopt some some energy saving habits or take on major energy efficiency upgrade, no matter what your budget, Fortis BC can help you save energy. Be sure to visit fortisbc.com/rebates, where you can also find amazing tips on low and no cost ways to save energy, plus buying advice for energy efficient products.
All right, welcome back. You guys have known each other for a very long time, and the results of you collaborating closely for a very long time are very evident in the awards you're winning. Before we start talking about this project, can you just quickly explain how you guys met? Like, you guys have known each other for many, many years, haven't you?
Yeah, well, since 2006, I think you mentioned.
2006, yeah.
So it's a interesting story. I was actually my first crack at building a really big multi-million-dollar home came from a fellow named Don Stewart and a client that believed in me named Al Shearer. And Ian at the time was interning off of
Don Stewart Architect.
with Don Stewart.
Yeah.
And that was I mean, I talk about highly detailed homes. So I talk about 64 pages of details. Everything was hand built. Everything was clear for an amazing home. And I kind of fell in love with working, because Ian, we worked with very closely. Don was a very hands-on architect. And we worked on several big projects together with Don Stewart and Ian. And then we kind of drifted apart. I hadn't seen you then like
Yeah.
5 or 6 years maybe, or
Yeah, I went to work at HCMA to finish my registration and become registered. So that was the hiatus, and then I continued to do my own work on like houses and so forth. And it was a renovation project in
on 17th,
Marpole,
wasn't it? Or
yeah, 17th, that
yeah,
you guys we reconnected again, and it was great project. And then since then,
we've been doing tons
probably
together.
about 8 projects or more.
Yeah,
So quite a few
we've got 3 or
the
4 on the
last
go
few
right
years.
now.
Yeah.
But we were looking at a project, and I said, "Well, who's the architect?" And they said, "Ian McLean." I went, "Ian, that rings a bell." And I went, I had to call him right away and say, "Ian, I'm looking at one of your projects."
Yeah.
And that project was, again, really tricky, very tight budget, but turned out to be really well done. It was very fun. And then from there, Ian said, "Well, we're not going to let it end here." So we just started referring work back and forth and kind of giving each other a
Yeah.
first chance, if you will. And from that has come, usually 2 or 3 jobs a year together.
Oh.
It's been good.
It's a great origin story. And of course, you guys are now working on a project together, or you've worked on a project that has won some awards. So let's have a little bit of a celebration here. But congratulations on these 3 awards: Best Environmental Initiative, BC Housing Award for Excellence in Housing Solutions, and Fortis BC Award for Excellence in Energy Efficiency in New Residential Construction. I feel like we need to pop the champagne or something.
Absolutely. Applause for everybody.
Applause. Yeah, like there we go. It's like, woo, I need to
Yeah,
like
we
do
have our
some
own sound effects here at Measure Twice, Cut Once.
budget issues, just hand claps.
Hey, zillions. Yeah.
Anyways, congratulations, you guys, because
you.
the
Thank
Haven
you.
Awards are
you.
very coveted, very hard to win, and so you guys did an amazing job. So let's talk about the project. How did you guys get on it together? Let's set the stage. I want drama.
Yeah, how'd it
lights,
get
action.
started? Like, who initiated it?
Well,
Because you referred
Nathan,
me, right?
I did
Yeah.
refer Todd and his team. I trying to recollect how I met Nathan. He reached out to me, and I don't know if he must have connected me
Is
somehow.
Nathan the homeowner?
Nathan
Okay.
Lee is the homeowner. Nathan and Allison are the homeowners, and he's like-minded in a lot of ways. His background is landscape architecture, and he's a very creative artist. And so we connected and started working on the design together. Nathan and I, with his wife Allison as well. So, and then we
Then you gave my name and they called
referred
me and
Best Builders, and we were it was quite early on.
Yep.
Because I like to get the builder connected early on. It's much better for the overall process.
Let's talk about that for a
Yeah.
second, because now we actually have 2 of you in the room together. And we've always talked about this on this podcast, about a lot of builders feeling that they should be on the project pretty close to the beginning, especially when things are being drawn up. So can you tell us a little bit of that process with Todd? And again, like you said a little bit of why you like to, but I want to take a deep dive through that.
Well, a big part of it is getting feedback on budget early on. Like if we're starting, the design is starting to take shape, and it's good to have the builder get to know the client, but also the site and where the design is going. And oftentimes they can provide feedback on like high level feedback on budgeting, which steers the project. It's fed back into the design. So and also it's just the longer history we have on a project together, the better it goes when it comes time to handing it over to the builder starts actually building it. The more familiar they are with the client and as the design's developed, they know it's important to the client. They know it's important to the overall design. So
I think there's definitely with ourselves. I mean, I can't speak for all builders, of course, but different builders come from different backgrounds. My background being, I'm a red seal carpenter. And when you've had as much experience building as I do, I think part of what I really appreciate is Ian opens that door for me with the owner and says, okay, so here's the design. What do you think? Like, do you see any problems? Do you see some
absolutely.
areas where maybe we could do this a little bit less expensive, or is it easier for you? So he's actually taking into account that, we've got to build this. It's my guys building it.
Yeah.
And I've been blessed with the experience that I can look at this and say, if we design this a little bit differently here, or we could utilize products. And that's where it's become a lot more fun. Like, I don't feel like I'm just getting, here's a drawing, you got to build it exactly like this. I could build spec homes all day long in my sleep. I can honestly say I don't really enjoy them. It's just nothing to it. I can have apprentices build spec homes. But when I build a home where I get to make an expression, if you will, I think Nathan's house was almost an artistic expression for us. We didn't have a lot of budget. He was really cool to try different things. He had an old chunk of bowling alley in his garage. He said,
Wow.
can you do something with this? I'm like, yeah, we'll make a countertop out of it. So he actually built his kitchen countertop out of an old bowling alley.
Wow.
So those are the kind of experiences I really want to encounter. So
Yeah.
And you've underscored something very important. When you are working with the right team, neither of you are about your egos. It is about the client first and foremost, and about the results. And the collaboration that goes with two professionals who get it like that will create much better results. Because this was not a traditional renovation where I'm going to do a new bathroom and kitchen. Like, this was
a new house.
It's a brand new
It's
house.
a brand new house. It used to be what, a cottage from the 1930s and 40s?
Yeah, we blew it down.
You blew it down and you created a new house. But this isn't like a regular house, right? This is a very unique situation in the number of units you've created, right?
100%. That was the difficulty, and that's all hands off to Ian for that, because Ian basically took a very squishy place and built like a legal duplex with a rental suite. So this client was able to have a beautiful home with a yard with his kids, and then create rental suites, which was also, he had a rental suite originally, and he had a tenant that he wanted to back in.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think as prices are so high in Vancouver and everywhere now in Canada, that a lot of homeowners are looking for mortgage helpers and ways to make the dream of living on a sort of what feels like a single family lot more affordable. So this was a legal duplex, which I believe they've held on to, but they have the opportunity to sell and realize, if they need the capital for that. But there's also a mortgage helper, a rental unit that's tied to the main unit, and we not sure if the listeners can see the photos, but
We'll have them up on the website
One of
just so they can take a look. But it's called Triadic for a reason.
Yeah.
You have 3 suites. And so just so I get my head around it, and of course to paint kind of the theater of the mind for the audience, it is a duplex, and then there is a suite attached to one of the ones. Why did you not make it a fourplex-ish then?
Well, there was the opportunity to do a laneway house, but the client wanted to use that for his studio, for his landscape architecture and so forth. But so there's 3 units in one building, and so that was kind of a tall order because there's zoning constraints, height, setbacks that we need to kind of work within an envelope, and then it's about how to make the space, each of the three spaces, they've all got to have good outdoor space, good natural light. And so what we did was more of a front to back duplex.
Not a
And
side by
so
side.
not a side by side. And so Nathan and Allison have the main unit, which is essentially oriented more towards the back. And they've got a great room, sort of like a main space that we did some tricks with the zoning. So we were able to give them a taller sort of grand room without any additional square footage. And they still get the benefit of a crawl space underneath it for mechanical and so forth. So there were like building challenges around that we worked through together. So it wasn't a super easy build, but it
No.
was
No.
sorry. No. But it maximized what the potential was for the lot and still reserved the space at the back for the homeowner's studio and
Yeah, he wanted the
garage.
studio in the
Yeah.
back. We probably could have been a laneway, but
Yeah.
I mean, the studio being something we're actually just completing now. We basically took his old garage and utilized all the old lumber to build studio in the back with like hand cut vaulted ceilings. And I mean, the photos for that will be really cool when they're all done because now the studio's finished. But he was really into reusing as much of the old product as we pulled out of the heritage home.
Mhm.
So you'll see the clawfoot tubs we reutilized, countertops. We even handpicked a lot of the fir beams out of the home. We selected some and then utilized them back again for like handrails, windowsills, just so the
Yeah.
house kind of told its own story. I know the one thing I really loved about this place is we actually, in his original house, that's where they had their kids. There was some casing molding in there, and it was very set. He had all the kids little lines for as the kids grew, and so we actually kept that piece of casing and then used it to match and put it back on his son's door and then match the casing down the hallway all with the same.
Mhm.
And then the other little cute thing is the two kids' bedrooms. The kids had never slept apart, the son and the daughter, because she has really bad night terrors. So one of the things that we thought up with Ian is we actually put a little secret door in the
Yeah.
room so that at night she could open the door if she was having nightmares and she could hear her brother breathing,
Oh,
or she could climb in through the door and climb into bed with him.
love it.
So it's just something really, but she was so scared about having her own room. And she expressed this to us. And we said, what if we make you a little secret door in the back of your closet? And so, that's those little things too that, for me, I get really excited about doing something simple. And then she goes, that's the first thing she shows all her friends when they go, is your secret door. So, but it's little stuff like that maybe you don't get from your average everyday builder,
Those special touches.
little things. Yeah.
And those are really neat. But what I really like about it at a very high level is, first of all, this is not an expensive place to live, or a cheap place to live. Sorry, it is a
No.
very expensive place to live.
Mhm.
And it's becoming less and less affordable for families. And so
Yeah.
we have to be creative in
Mhm.
order to maintain the lifestyles we want to maintain. But at the same time, we are also dealing with densification issues and how do we make sustainable neighborhoods without radically altering their DNA. And so what's great is where one family could barely have room to live, now 2 or 3 families will live, and that's going to solve a lot of problems at once as well. Um, can we talk a little bit about some of the bits and pieces of the home? We want to talk a little about some of the energy efficiency and maybe indoor air quality, because those are important conversations, especially if we look at the smoke outside of this window right now.
Mhm.
Can you guys dig into a little about how you tackled that? Because I imagine it would have been more challenging to engineer 3 separate climate zones than 1 separate climate zone in that same size space, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, and we have the restrictions the city lays on us too. And of course, you have firewalls to think about and sprinkler systems. And I mean, the firewalls, especially every time you penetrate it, the city doesn't like and we had to do, I mean, floors were firewall.
Mhm.
I mean, the clients, again, there are ways of creating a efficient way of heating your home if you don't mind doing a little research, without breaking the bank. And this was actually our challenge from our client was, how do I get my air conditioning? How do I get my air changes and efficiently heat these units? Because again, we're always talking about money. We're limited on hydropower. So to be able to create that system, we use hot water baseboards in a lot of the home, which also tied into the hot water supply. The air conditioning system was actually designed by our mechanical contractor, and it became a very low cost, high energy efficient system without having to break the bank.
I I also feel like we worked a lot on passive ventilation. So Nathan and Allison's unit, for example, has great natural light, a lot of operable windows, and a big folding door at the back. But it also has a top, like it's got a allows for natural ventilation through the upper floor as well. So um, I think uh, the sort of partie of the design helped a lot with that too. And I mean, one of the things that's we really try to do is these are smaller homes and or well, it's not that small, but it's
It's a small house, dude.
it's a small house, but
How many
but we
square foot? Just so
it's
curiosity.
3,300 square feet total for all three units.
Oh wow.
So but they feel there's great light, natural light, and there's great connection. Each unit has great connection to outdoor space, which in Vancouver's climate and just people want that sort of it's an element of the single family home that people want to maintain. They don't want to necessarily live in apartment boxes. They want to have a sense of a yard or garden
And the current
so
code changes are going to make this interesting. As you said, how do you jam 3 or 4 units into a 33-foot wide lot and
yeah.
still give you a feeling like, well, I may as well be in an apartment?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, this is what the design of this worked very well because it did give. So Nathan and his family has a beautiful big private backyard, all on their own. Don't have to share that with the neighbors or anything. In the front yard, there are 2 separate areas for yard.
Mhm.
Both of them have their own gardens. So it does give you a feeling like 3 individual units. The complexity of the home was a little bit more to build it because of all the firewall issues and stuff we had. But having said that, I almost want to say we fluked out, but to be able to see the job when it's done and to be able to realize that you've accomplished everything that client has asked for, which in the end is what we're looking for. We're looking for acknowledgement from him and his wife and the smile on their kids' faces as they see the bedroom. That's the biggest reward we get is you realize like you're going like, I hope this is everything they dreamed of and more.
Yeah.
And then to see that smile and you realize, okay, we nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
To get the awards, to be honest, I wasn't going to even enter this house in because it wasn't one of our big budget homes. It was a very simple build, and we were actually talking with Mr. Knowles, who does our photos, and he said, "This is a really fun project. Why haven't you entered this one?" And I said, "I don't know. What would I enter it in for?" And so we started walking through it and talking with Ian about it, and realizing, it is a unique home. It had a lot of really neat special features that maybe I didn't see for myself because it was just something we just do it.
Well,
So
what I love about it, like you said, it is a modest budget because it makes it being like, oh, a lot of people could build something like this.
yeah,
And how do you work, the two of you, with someone's budget like this to keep it on track and make sure that it is realistic?
And what was the budget for this out of curiosity? Inquiring minds want to know.
the budget for this was actually the budget originally was 1 million. It went up to 1.2. So it was 1.2 million dollars. We actually, obviously, Nathan actually followed our system, which is probably the first time. We give him a budget and an outline of saying this is what you can spend in every category. You have so much for tiles, so much for hardwood, so much for, and he actually followed it to a T. Some of the things he asked for in additional was more where our carpenters came into play, was like the extra for trim work and the countertop. And then the studio became a separate issue, which we budgeted separately. But Nathan knew the importance of teamwork because the other thing Nathan didn't use was an interior designer, which we thought was going to make it very difficult, but he was very on point. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that for clients. He's a very rare. He worked very closely with Ian and worked closely with us. We did a lot of extra groundwork for him, but he was determined to come in on budget. So because we were able to work all so closely together, um, I mean, the job just fell into place. And we've done a lot of pre-planning. a lot of pricing up front, so we knew what all the costs were going to be. So when he wanted something extra, we could say, well, this is how it affects your budget. Do you want it? Well, no, maybe I'll do it later. Is this something I could do down the road? So that when we did hit a problem, it was easier to take on because we already knew all the costs that were fixed. So proper planning with your team at the front carries straight through to the end if you've executed it properly. So I think that's again the biggest thing you can do is get the architect, get the interior designer, get a good contractor that understands what you want. You don't maybe not the cheapest guy, but a guy that you think is going to be able to work through problems with you and understand your goals, and then that should be able to be followed through straight to the end.
Yeah. And one thing that we didn't talk about yet is I've heard this through many builders, especially here in Vancouver and even New Westminster, but oil tank. Do you want to talk a little bit about the oil tank, the dreaded oil
Oil
tank?
tank ambush.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a clearance letter that said there was no oil tank on their property. Of course, you pull the house down and first shovel in, bang, there's the oil tank. Um, there are some, the rules that we have to follow. So, of course, we had to open the tank. We did have some leaching. So we had to take care of that first and then dispose of the tank legally. That was not expected. There was a bit of a skirmish with the realtor and the previous owner because we did have a letter signed off on, but we didn't have to face a fight. They actually did come forward and say, yes, we will pay for those costs. So, we just handled it very calmly and it slowed us down for a few weeks, but we were able to deal with it, get it off the property. We did talk to both neighbors on both sides. There are chemical compounds that you can add, so it actually shows where it's leached into because you are responsible for, it's not just your property, you're responsible for your neighbor's properties as well. So we wanted to make sure we did all the research, had it all signed off on, and then we were able to proceed fairly quickly.
Just for people that might not know, because it's still kind of a common occurrence, especially in the older parts of Vancouver, Lower Mainland. What is an oil tank? Like, why do we have them still?
Oh, well, our old furnaces used to be run on kerosene.
Yeah.
Kerosene, oil tank. I mean, and so these tanks a lot of times are buried and were never emptied. Back in when I first started, you used to be able to, the fire department would come out, they'd cut open the top of a tank, pump the fuel out, and then you'd haul it out or you just fill it with sand and you could leave it. Well, you can't anymore because people realize these tanks leach. So they pull the tanks out, then they want to, then they want to explore the ground to make sure. I mean, you have things like the old piping used to be wrapped in asbestos, and so you have all these other elements now that you're looking for, right, to make sure that we're safe. So it can be tricky. So don't take it lightly and don't just rip it out of the ground and throw it in the way on a Saturday afternoon in the back of your truck, because if your neighbor finds some kerosene in their yard, then you could be held liable. So definitely take that seriously and do it right. Do the research up front before you buy the property.
Absolutely. I think we could probably keep talking about this project all day. It's been a remarkably interesting conversation with so much ground to cover and, some great, great learning. And some of the lessons that I think are really pertinent for today's learning is, first of all, working with the right team. So your design and build team to maximize the available space on your lot and also maximize the impact on what can be a constrained budget, right? We don't have an unlimited pot of money. And once again, you have made sure to underscore the importance of, if you are a homeowner, if you are contemplating a project like this, bring your team together as early as possible and have them working together, because the end results are going to speak for themselves. The fact that you could take this project in budget, and by the way, for people who are listening and watching this in Winnipeg and the rest of Canada, 1.2 is cheap for Vancouver market.
Yeah.
Not so much for Winnipeg and the rest of Canada, but to have it come in at such a low price point is quite remarkable. So it speaks highly to both of you, your many years of experience, and what's really neat is here you guys are working on your first respective projects together all those years ago, and you're still working together and pumping out awesome projects right now.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and before we go, I know you guys have told me so many great things this interview, but I would like one more tip for our audience from each of you. Just give us one more little piece of wisdom. And it doesn't have to be anything to do with this house, but if somebody was coming to you, Ian, and looking to find an architect, what kind of tip would you give them? Todd, something to do with somebody coming to build a home.
Do you want to go first? Or you want me to
Unless
go
you have a
first?
lotto tip that we don't know
I have
about.
one
yet.
I guess. Yeah. I wish I'd thought about it earlier. I guess one thing that comes to mind, perhaps not the most important, but it is important nonetheless to have an architect that understands the intricacies of working in the city of Vancouver.
Oh, yeah.
It's got its own unique challenges in
Permit
zoning and
process.
permit process, and it can make things either extraordinarily more difficult, or it can make things fairly smooth if you've got a designer or architect who is familiar with the processes. So that's it.
My tip, I think, is the same tip I do. I give all the time is take the time to interview the builders. Don't worry so much about the budget. Don't even bring the budget up because anyone will tell you anything you want to hear to get the job sometimes. But I want to say, take the time to understand the builder's process, who he is, how dispute resolutions work, a little bit about himself, how long has he been in business, because you need to be comfortable with this person. Like this person is going to be a big part of your life through the planning process, permit stage, and you want to be able to think, when I'm panicking, I want to be able to call this guy and
Absolutely.
have him settle it down. I want him to have a way he's going to solve all this, and his team should be able to come together.
Mhm.
You're spending your life savings. If your team doesn't care for you, move on and find a team that does. So you need to pick that person that you do think is actually going to care for you and your family the same way they care for their own.
Great answer. And I think the most important question to ask you guys before we go is, where did you put your Haven Awards?
Mine?
Yeah. Why do you want? Do you have like a room because you have a lot of them? Do you have an
The
award
wall of
room?
his office with all the other ones he's won over the last 20 years, probably.
Yeah, they're in my office. Just, I mean, I put them up on the shelf and right above all my other sort of plaques and stuff. But I mean, the Haven Awards for me has always been fun. I think I've done it since, and more so, even though you don't have the Georgies or anything else, it's just because the Haven is a room of all my friends and all my peers. And I think it's, it's not every day you get to walk up on the stage. I think my wife, hugged Ron and I was hugging Dawn as I went by and high-fiving Mike. But to see all your friends there cheering you on, there's no egos, no animosity. It's just, well done. I'm going to buy you a drink afterwards. And so I think that's what makes the awards really fun. And I know I think these are your first ones, weren't they? Your first
I
Haven ones?
I have one with Shakespeare Holmes that
Oh,
I
there
won
you go.
2 years
You
ago.
can't say that name.
Yeah,
No,
sorry.
just kidding.
Oh, wow.
I'm just kidding.
Sorry, Mark.
Mine,
No, I'm not.
no, that was a great project too, and it was a good experience.
Yeah.
Are they in your
Mine
office?
are
And all
mine
of
are in
them-
my office behind my computer, so if I'm having a meeting, they're visible behind me. So
Your daughter loves them.
my daughter loves them. Yeah,
Absolutely.
they're beautiful.
Yeah.
Todd, you were talking about winning a Haven Award and being with all your friends, and that's really one of the greatest parts for those of us who are part of this organization is we're surrounded by our friends and family. And today we indeed had a conversation with two friends about some really great information. Very privileged to be able to talk to both of you today. I always learn so much when we have people like you on because you have such a different approach to doing everything, and we really genuinely appreciate you guys coming in and making time to talk to us. Now, before we go, I have to talk about barbecues for a second. Not barbecues, specifically a barbecue, and that is a barbecue that someone can win. So our wonderful friends at Fortis BC have once again brought to the table Napoleon Prestige P500 stainless steel natural gas barbecue. It's worth over $1,500. And yeah, thank you Fortis BC for that. And we're going to give it away to one of our lucky viewers or listeners. All you have to do, haven.ca/measure twice, cut once, tell your family, tell your friends, enter lots, and hopefully we'll have someone getting a new barbecue very soon.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Love having you on. And for notes and links and everything mentioned on today's episodes, including, of course, the beautiful photos of Triadic, all you need to do is go to haven.ca/measure twice, cut once. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both.